Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for logging on. I see a number of people already starting to dial in, to log in. We're so excited to have you. We're going to give it a couple minutes as we see the numbers just jumping in. But really, truly thankful for you giving your time today and sharing time with our panelists who we'll introduce very, very soon. In the meantime, as we're warming up, if you wouldn't mind in the chat function of Zoom, which I hope that at this point we're all really familiar with the Zoom technology. If you wouldn't mind just sharing where in the world you are calling in or dialing in from and where you are on your motherhood journey. If you are expecting, when would that be? If you've got children already, how old are they? We can't wait to hear who's in the audience. We'll get started really soon. New Jersey. We were just talking about New Jersey and Massachusetts. So it's like you knew. Wow, congrats. Wow. Michigan, Brooklyn, New York City. Congrats, everyone. I see expecting to 20 week to
Due
20.
date is today.
Yay! Oh my gosh.
So exciting.
We hope that this is just going to support and you're going to take it all with you through the due date.
This is just like spicy food, this panel.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Come on, little baby. You got it. Virginia, Seattle, Atlanta. Amazing. Oh, congrats, everyone. Also, for those who are postpartum, and for those who are expecting, I'm so impressed that you have the wherewithal to find us and log on and be present here. That is already a win. So thank you so much.
I was just going to say, I see a 3-week-old. Like, Hannah, you are winning.
Oh,
right
mama. From France. Wow, our farthest reaching attendee. Thank you so much. Congrats. All right, so I am gonna continue to let people join. And again, once again, thank you for being here. As you're joining, you're welcome to jump onto the chat function and share with us where you're joining from and how old your child is or where you are in your pregnancy journey. And I feel like 1203 is sort of the new 1205, and we have such a rich topic and such amazing stories on these panelists' journey. And so I'd love to just get started. Thank you so much for being here. We are talking Childcare 101 and the 5th trimester, both such amazing and important things to be thinking about, not just in this pandemic stage, but truly always. And so thank you for allowing this to be top of mind. My name is Gretchen Richer. I'm the head of family experience at Vivvi Early Learning. And we're an early learning and childcare organization based in New York City. We have 3 campuses in the New York City area, and we also offer an in-home program where really as a response to the pandemic and trying to meet our families wherever they are in their life, in their world, in their work, in their parenting experience, to bring the Vivvi at campus experience in home. And so we're just grateful to be partnering with Hatch, who I'll tell a little bit of my Hatch story later when we introduce Katie, has just been a real source of truth for all families on this journey. And we're always just so excited to have them here. We're going to spend, if all works out well, at the stroke of 40 minutes, we'll have talked about so many things and shared so many stories. And then we're going to turn it over to the participants. So start thinking about questions you want to ask, or if anything jumps out at you during our time together, please use that chat function and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. Hopefully we'll answer a lot of really good questions during our time with the panelists. And I'd love to, without further ado, turn it over to our amazing panelists, Lori, Katie, and Tina. Lauren, I'll start with you. If you don't mind, if you could intro what you do, or maybe intro what you don't do, and that's like a shorter list. Age of children and a childhood journey in a nutshell, since we'll be tackling a lot of more specifics about your journey, and then we'll follow suit.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for that nice introduction. I probably have the longest journey, so I'll try to keep it short because my kids are now, I have two boys who are 9 and 12. I'm sitting in our dining room area, and this is the first time I've been able to do a call like outside of a closed off room because my boys are both in in-person school this week, which is a huge victory. I was for a long time a magazine editor. I was at Glamour for most of my career for 13 years. In my time there, I had both of my sons. I then left to write and research my book, The Fifth Trimester, about the return to work after baby. That was an expression that I came up with when I was in it, kind of out of necessity, and then did a lot of research looking beyond my own admittedly pretty privileged experience, and put that all together into a book, launched the book, and then the book was really the launch pad for a larger business where I now go into organizations and companies and help them do a better job of retaining moms, but now pandemic times, really retaining all parents and caregivers by offering them the support that we really should have had all along. And I'm so excited to talk about what I've learned from my clients and hopefully offer you some of the research that I learned in researching my book too.
Amazing. Katie, I'll have you jump in.
My name's Katie Goldsmith. I'm the VP of brand here at Hatch. I've been here for about a year. I started 3 weeks before the pandemic started. I found out on my second week that I was pregnant with my second child. And by my third week, I was packing everything up to go to central Pennsylvania, to leave the city because we, weren't sure where life was. So we have a 2-year-old. I have a 5.5-month-old. So I've returned to work twice now under really different circumstances. And in the midst of all of this, like so many people in this country, made a move out to the suburbs because it was what was best for our family. So we're now in New Jersey. So I also did a move in the midst of all of this, a second move in the midst of all this as well. And just in short, I really I battled with what my fifth trimester was going to look like my first go around and didn't really have a lot of time to settle into it before the pandemic happened. And now I'm still, even though I'm back to work, kind of grappling with what my fifth trimester looks like the second go around. So I'm really excited to talk to this group today and to hear from all of you, because I think the thing I've learned the most through all of this is that I learned the most from the moms in my circle and like batting through how we're all figuring this out. So that's me.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And Tina, thank you for being here as our Vivvi rep for the day.
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Tina Mangan. I am a mom, but also full-time back at work, a senior client director of client services for a branding and package design agency here in New York City. I live in Soho. I have a 15-month-old daughter named Madison, and she has been one of the founding students at the Vivvi Tribeca campus. I actually interviewed and visited Vivvi when I was about 2 months pregnant. Was so excited to send her there when I had to go back to work after 4 months of maternity leave, only to find out that Vivvi unfortunately could not open yet. So I was back at work. It'll be a year now. I started again on May 4th of last year and had Madison and my husband home with me while we're trying to juggle it all while we waited for Vivvi to open back up again in August. So definitely not the return to work that I expected. Haven't really seen any of my coworkers in person. So yeah, am happy to answer any questions about Vivvi, but also just being a new mom, first time mom, going back to work from my bedroom.
Thank you for that. And I'll jump in and just share a little bit about my journey. I have a 3-year-old, and prior to working at Vivvi, where I've been about a year, I worked for a company called Union Square Hospitality Group, and my re-entry from a work perspective could not have happened without an advocate in the people department and an advocate for just family leave in general and being able to come back in the way that I felt I could come back. That said, I also wish I would have been able to advocate for myself even more instead of kind of doing the right thing and feeling like I had to be like super present and very very much like, oh, I had a baby, but I can do it all. It's the exact same thing, returning to work, right? And then I also read Lauren Smith's Brody's book, which was really, again, such a very honest and spoke to how a lot of mothers were feeling and what a lot of mothers' choices were. And what I loved about your book is that you were giving a lot of information, and you were also saying, now I'm giving you this, you decide what's right for you. And that felt very empowering, because I felt like someone did all the research and wrote a book about it, and then I could kind of pick and choose, which was great for me. And so I did group childcare, I did nanny through pandemic, and now I'm doing a double of nanny and 2 days at Vivvi. And so what's really great, I think, is that you can also make changes too. And we can talk about how the changes affected your lives. So I'm going to go back to Katie and Tina really quickly and just talk about your immediate re-entry right back into work, and what has that been like for you, Katie, right after maternity leave, and what are the things that you thought through this time around? And Tina, if you want to reflect on what going back to work meant for you, also in a pandemic, but in a little bit of a different situation. So Katie, I'll peg you first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, my first time around, I had planned on getting a nanny and did get a nanny, which we're really grateful. That was something that we could afford and was an option for us. But my husband and I at the time worked long and unpredictable hours. So a daycare environment wasn't going to be the best fit for us at the time. So we hired a nanny, and I found out after I'd hired someone wonderful and she settled in with us that I was being reduced to 3 days a week at that company. So in essence, I was going to be like cost neutral. Like now I was bringing home no money by keeping this person, but I wasn't ready to make a change. So it was a really big emotional hurdle to make peace with the fact that I'm a little bit of an older mom. I'm 38 now. I was 36 when I had my first, that I had worked for so many years of my life and built such a career. And all of a sudden I was bringing home nothing to my family. Again, that's like how it felt to me. Everyone is like navigating these decisions for themselves. So I don't want that to be reflective of how anyone here should feel. But that was a really big emotional hurdle for me, just to make sense of like the cost balance here of not wanting to give up my career, but like, why am I working and leaving my children if I'm bringing so little home? Shortly thereafter, I got my job at Hatch, which solved a little bit of that, cost problem, but also was really wonderful because I was such a huge fan of the brand and was such a beautiful fit. I found I was ready to like settle into yet another transition into my 5th trimester, now working out of the home, when the pandemic hit. And in that same week or so, I found out I was pregnant with my second. So shortly thereafter, ended up in March in central Pennsylvania with no childcare, pregnant with a toddler. Hatch was incredible at supporting that journey, but like for any of you who have been going through this, it also like is what it is. There are only so many hours in the day, and if you're chasing a toddler while on a Zoom and then have to make up all the work that you like couldn't get done because you didn't have your hands free, you're doing it from 8 to 11 p.m. Like that cycle is really endless and horrible. As truly as supportive as Hatch could have been, there's still just that many hours in the day. And then now my next transition into my 5th trimester that I'm going through now, we did, when we moved to New Jersey, I knew I couldn't do 2 under 2 without help. And so we made the choice to kind of break our COVID bubble and bring a nanny into the mix here, which was a really emotional decision for us. I'm sure a lot of you were in a different place in the pandemic, but that was really hard for me after being like so tightly bubbled for so long to bring that risk factor into our family. But it's definitely been the best decision for us, and has allowed a little more sanity into the house. But I still battle every day the decision to be have someone with my kids that many hours a day versus wanting to be there myself. And that choice between full-time mom, stay-at-home mom, unpaid mom, whatever we want to call them in 2021, I still battle that like emotional conflict a lot. And I think that's been the hardest part.
I have like 13 questions that have come out of this, but I'm gonna ask and then
Yeah,
also
take it to
balance with Tina. So I'd love to understand what factors for you influenced the nanny decision versus where we're gonna go with Tina, more of a childcare decision, and then knowing that Hatch is such a supportive environment, what do you feel like would be your words of wisdom to really advocate for what you needed, and how did you make that message clear to the team, or how would you make that message clear to a team that maybe wasn't as supportive with Hatch as Hatch?
I guess
I'm pegging you. Yeah, I'm gonna ask you.
Okay. The way to talk to I mean, I was really fortunate. Again, I was really honest with them up front. I think, we're still in a world, I hope no one here faced this, but we're still in a world where, like, I personally even get a little anxiety telling my boss I'm pregnant. Like, will that be received in startup environment, especially like as being like good news? And thank God it was. But, that's not, it's really hard. But I think the more transparent you are about what you need, the more that your bosses have the opportunity to rise to the challenge and also have the opportunity to support you if you don't even give them the chance. I think it's really important not to like already set yourself up with an apology, but to set it up as I know my worth and I want to give you the opportunity to support me here. And I think that's been really valuable in our conversations.
Thank you. And flipping the other direction, Tina, you had a similar kind of timeline perspective, and it sounded like you were pretty much always a group childcare decision. Can you chat about your journey back?
Yeah, sure. So I think for us, group childcare was definitely the way that we were leaning. We had friends do both nanny and group childcare. For me, it was I wanted the socialization, and I wanted Madison to be with other kids, and I also just wanted her to be more in like a learning facility where activities were happening, scheduled activities were happening every day. I'm definitely not like an arts and crafts mom. Like, I live in like a pretty minimalist apartment, so like there was no painting or anything like going on at my house. So messy activities I preferred to be outside of the home with teachers instead. So that was an easy decision for us. And I think we both didn't have family. We don't have family close by. So I think an option of having like a parent fill in or step in or lean in wasn't really there for us either. So I wanted the consistency of childcare, and really only looked at Vivvi. That was the only facility that we toured and just fell in love instantly. So it was a pretty easy decision for me. I think also like the thought of interviewing nannies was very daunting as well for me. So I just thought, if I can just figure out group childcare first and feel comfortable with that, I won't even have to worry about interviewing anyone. So luckily that worked out for us. But then when it was time for me to go back, yeah, I think I had like a similar situation to Katie, where I just felt like, okay, I can do this, but I'm basically like working, like my salary is essentially like going to Vivvi. But to me, I was like, I want her to have this experience. I thought it was the best. My schedule at work was a bit more flexible. My husband, not so much. His hours were definitely way more insane. He works in finance. So for him, it was like, great. But for me, I was going to have to put those parameters in place of blocking my calendar from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. so I can get Madison ready and get to school. And then at the same thing, at the end of the day, like, I have to leave the office by 5 in order to pick her up on time. Vivvi hours are amazing, but I'm always like, have that guilt of like, well, I don't want her to be the last kid there. Like, I want to get her early if I can. So when the pandemic happened and I went back to work, I had Madison home with me for a little bit until she was 6 months old, until Vivvi opened up again, which was definitely a juggle. But I think I had my husband home as well, which was definitely a blessing. And now, being 1 year into it, yeah, I think I still have the guilt. Like I'm sad that I'm not there to like see all those milestones. I mean, my daughter took her first steps at Vivvi. I never tell anyone that except you 66 participants on this call. I pretend I was the first one that saw it, but like there's milestones that I missed. And you know, to me, that's okay because I know she's in like a happy learning environment, and we have our special moments, you know, before and after school and on the weekends. And that's just something to me that I had to take in stride and balance and know that I can keep my career going forward because she's not going to be this little peanut for forever. She's going to grow up and go off to school one day too. And I want to make sure that I can keep advancing in my career too. So yeah, that's it for me. And then I think one last thing I'll say about like the nanny too versus childcare, especially now for us living in a small New York City apartment. And after the pandemic was, you know, we're still in it, but when she was able to go to school, it was so nice to have a routine for her. We were able to like get up and get ready and pack her bag and walk somewhere. And just that physical step of like leaving your apartment or home where you're now working and living and everything is so blended together. I just felt so thankful that at least she had like a new environment to experience and she was starting to develop her own routine. So that was just like one benefit, I think, of having her physically outside of the home as well.
Thank you. Lauren, I am sure you've got 1,000 things to
I
say.
have, I could just talk
saw-
for now.
yeah, I think I'd love for you to respond both, you know, hearing these two stories, and there's an emotional context, there's a prioritizing what's important to the family context, and then there's an advocating to go back to work. And how do you eliminate all the things that are out there coming in and really define, you know, a plan? Or can you give us some?
There is so much that I have learned. I mean, the reason I wrote my book and did this research and started this whole 2.0 career for myself is because I was missing the kind of support that I'm now, you know, really, really grateful to be able to offer to people, because I have learned from literally thousands of new parents. And I have heard so many people say a lot of the things, you know, that Tina and Katie, that you've just shared those feelings. And I don't want to be dismissive or diminish the reality of the fact that very many of us do feel guilt that we're not with our children, or the reality that, you know, so many families, even those of us who think of ourselves as being in fairly progressive partnerships, tend to think of the childcare as being like, you know, coming out of the woman's salary. You know, Katie, you called it cost neutral when you were trying to decide whether or not it was worth in a 3-day job, you know, paying for childcare. I encourage you to try to externalize the factors that are involved there, everybody on this call, because the reality is there's a very good chance that in, you know, in a country that has the gender wage gap that we have, and we know that 80% of the gender wage gap is caused by the motherhood penalty. There's a very, very good chance that if you're in a heterosexual relationship, the husband in that relationship, the male partner, is probably better paid for the work that he does than the woman is. That is not your fault. That is not your partner's fault. But in talking in ways in which, like, the childcare is the woman's responsibility to pay for financially, or to sort of rationalize financially, we are perpetuating that. So do everything you can to try to think of the childcare as being a percentage of your total household income, and realize that, and I like to arm everybody who's going into any kind of negotiating conversation with a lot of facts about how valuable women are in leadership, which is not to say everybody needs to be their most ambitious and try to be a leader, but it is pretty compelling when you hear that if we had parity, if we had actually 50% representation in boardrooms and in executive level positions by women, that our national GDP would go up. That it has been studied by McKinsey that companies would be more profitable if they had more women in leadership. So you are valuable. And so when you ask for these things, and when you get a little bare and a little more honest than you're comfortable with about the needs that you have, and you present a plan that allows you to have the flexibility that you need to have, you're actually doing something good for your company. You're investing in your ability to stay, and you're investing in their ability to be able to keep you. And I'm just going to roll all these themes in once, not just you, but when you advocate for a need that you have as a mom, it means that there's, even if it's uncomfortable, you have some degree of privilege that is allowing you to offer that plan, make that ask, stretch a little bit that's uncomfortable. You are surrounded by people who do not feel as comfortable as you for all kinds of other reasons. So please, please know that when you do that, you're not, it's so tempting to think of, and I felt this way, that when you're asking for something, when you're presenting a plan, negotiating for something, that it's like, because you have this very intense need in your personal life. And obviously that's true. The stakes have never felt higher than when you have, especially your first child and you're trying to return to work. But if you're doing that, you're actually advocating not just for you, but for all moms. And if you're advocating for all moms, you're really advocating for all parents. And if you're advocating for all parents, you're really advocating for everyone who's a caregiver. And I challenge you to find a single person you work with who does not care for someone in some way, even if the someone they're caring for is themselves. It's so, so important that we treat these issues of flexibility comprehensively and with access to all, to avoid perpetuating some of the stigma that is very real and that is financially really felt. And I commend both of you guys for talking about money right out of the gate. Like, awesome. That's something that 10 years ago people weren't as comfortable talking about with colleagues. And I think of everybody on this call as my colleague, by the way. Oh my gosh, what else did I write down? Okay, the other thing I want to share, and then like I'll let you take right back over, Gretchen, sorry, is the daycare versus nanny decision is so real that I knew what decision we had made in my family. And I'll share, we had a nanny in our home, Jean. She was awesome. Obviously there were like some bumps along the way, but she was a good fit for our family for 7 years. And then after that, when the kids were in school, we moved into after school babysitters, but who were consistent caregivers in our home. That was largely because my husband is a doctor. He was in his medical residency and I was the breadwinner at that point. It was a financial stretch to avoid a nanny. I'm sorry, to avoid, oh my God, sorry. Oh my God, that's so Freudian too. It was a financial stress to employ a nanny, but we made that decision because his hours, he worked overnights for a week at a time. I was working until midnight, 2 a.m. You'll notice I'm not doing that job anymore. But when I was researching my book, the very first chapter in the book is about your childcare decision, because so often it is the most heated decision you'll have to make as a new parent. And it's the thing that people worry about the most. I will admit to you, it was the last chapter I wrote. I was so nervous to say to, the women of America that there's a right decision around childcare. And so, as with everything else, I looked at the research and I looked at, there's a compendium of studies over the course of 15 years. It's hundreds of studies that were all sort of looked at together in one like giant mega study. I forget what the scientific term for that is. But it was looked at by the National Institute of Childhood Health and Human Development. And there were absolutely cases to be made, positive and negative, about children's development in either a daycare center setting, in the home cared for by a family member, in the home cared for by a mom or a dad, nanny in the home, group childcare setting that's not like a center-based setting. Like, all of those scenarios had pluses and minuses. But this is the joy of a compendium. When you looked at everything all added together, the bottom line takeaway, and I was so relieved, and this was the thing that let me actually go ahead and write this chapter of the book, was that it said that the biggest predictor of your child's success in their childcare situation is the parent's emotional comfort with that decision. And I was like, thank God, because then I could go and write using interviews, using people's experiences, finding out what it took for them to feel comfortable. And I think that is so important right now when we are, still in a pandemic. I am loath to say post-pandemic, but we're like figuring out like what our third quarter looks like, right, in pandemic. And these decisions are more emotional and more emotional than ever. And so if you have feelings about like Tina said, like not wanting a mess in your home, like that's valid actually, because that you're going to feel less anxious and, more comfortable in your home if there's not paint everywhere. That works for you. That's something you should actually listen to emotionally. And of course, logistics and finance are super important, but your feelings around the logistics and whether or not the parents are going to be able, if there's two, to split up like the pickup and the drop off. Like your feelings about that matter. Your feelings about whether or not you want to make a stretch to afford something, those matter too. So listen to the feelings as you make these decisions. And now I'll be quiet and let Gretchen take back over.
I'm probably going to ask you another question, so just be prepared to go back.
Wait, sorry, can I clarify? Because we focus a lot on the whole like and baby care, my salary. And I see someone wrote, is it anti-feminist? I battle all those same questions. That part, I guess I just want to clarify to my feeling there is that it was my feeling. Like it wasn't the way my husband was making me feel or the even external world was making me feel. It was like, I had worked so hard in my career for so long, and it was so important to me to financially contribute. And it was my personal struggle with like, even as feminist as I am. And, you know, I bought my own apartment by myself before I was married and like, you know, all the things that were so important to me. It was like me making peace with all of that. My mom's a stay-at-home mom. My sister's a stay-at-home mom or unpaid mom. And so it was me just like, if I'm not bringing home any money, like, is this worth it? Like, what's the long game? Like, how do I define this next chapter for myself? So I do just want to clarify, like, I battle all those same anti-feminist questions as well. And that like, none of those things were coming from the people in my life. It was really just this like.
And I think too, you can be data driven and understand the data behind everything. And, you know, I said this last time. I was at a place where I was interviewing nannies and I was being very logical and very data driven and very, you know, I had my list. But at the end of the day, you have to feel a connection and you have to know that this is a good person. And so sometimes the heart and the emotion have to take precedent over the data. And sometimes it's the other way around. But I think knowing whenever to say like, okay, this is my brain talking and really my heart wants this and I have to go here. It's kind of, you're going to perpetually live in that balance as a mother, you know, for the rest of your life.
I'll add too that when I started doing this research, I had a good number of biases that I have learned to shake off, and I am sure I'm loaded still with lots more biases. You know, my bias going into the research was that, you know, like working moms were moms who were paid for their work. That has really expanded. One thing that has also I've sort of developed is the idea that true feminism is not necessarily, it's not exactly the same thing as working mom ambition, right? Like true feminism is being able to have agency to make the best decision for your family. And obviously, like we're only able to have that agency if we have options, if we have resources. And so acknowledging that's really important, but I would never want to make anyone feel criticized for feeling the way they feel or making decisions that they make around supporting their family. The whole point is to be able to support your family in the way that feels most comfortable for you.
I'm going to ask you to continue to expand on that. And as you're thinking about advocacy and agency, and have you seen anything? I think it's pretty clear that we know that childcare is a little bit broken in this country. Like, let's just name that. That being said, the pandemic has really pushed so many things to the forefront of the conversation. Would you say that this gives people more power to come to their employer with what they want and how they want, or to be able to sit at home with their family and say, flexibility is now this definition, and maybe in the past flexibility wasn't? Lauren, could you start on that? And then ladies, I'd love for you to.
I'll just get super personal and tell you that, you know, a year ago, what is today's date? Yeah, like a year ago. So my husband was recovering from COVID. There was no PPE at his hospital. He got sick. It was really early on. And I had gone from standing on stage at Lincoln Center like a week earlier, talking to thousands of women about, you know, the power they had as moms in their workplaces. And now like the word workplace, what does that even mean? You know? And I had a complete, like the closest I've ever been to having a breakdown when I realized suddenly my husband was going to be gone. He recovered. Thank goodness, obviously, thank goodness he recovered. But like in this story, he recovered and went back to work, but he was gone 15 hours a day. He got relocated close enough that he could drive. We bought a car, like life turned upside down a lot. My kids were home, but I went from being somebody who like did our makeup and hair and was like standing on a stage in front of people, advocating for all this stuff, to being home, not being able really to work, having like 20 gigs disappear on me in a moment's notice. Like my whole year was going to be like my best year yet as somebody who's self-employed. Everything disappeared in a puff of smoke, except for a couple of columns that I write. And I had a total reckoning with myself of, is this work niche? Does it not count? And where I'm going with this is that the thing that helped me was actually when my best friend on the phone was like, you know what? It feels like we're all in our 5th trimesters now. It feels like we're all like coming out of maternity leave, figuring out how to be more transparent than we've ever been before and comfortable with it and prioritize our kids, having all these conflicting feelings, like having to advocate for ourselves with like the highest stakes possible. And I was like, oh, Eureka, thank God. Like everybody needs a best friend, like my best friend. She's the best. And I realized then that I
Well,
needed
we
to
should invite her on the panel next time.
Oh, yes, exactly. She's teaching right now. She's a teacher. I needed to expand the approach that I was taking. So it's really not just about new moms, but we were all in our 5th trimesters. And so the reason that I tell you that is because part of my work is to be transparent about the stuff that's hard and to model that for everybody who I work with. But also because it helped me really realize that this moment that we're in right now, and it took the media, and I am the media, I'm a journalist, but it took the media a few months to catch up. But all these headlines we're seeing right now about working moms, about women of color being disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, both in job losses and in vulnerability because of the kinds of jobs that they're doing, make them more vulnerable, about the fact that our society is propped up on childcare. These are all ultimately like, let's keep them in the headlines and let's learn from them and let's use this time for long overdue progress. And what does that mean for everybody who is watching this at home, potentially with a baby in their arms? It means that when we talk about paid labor and unpaid labor, and when we talk about, the rights of domestic caregivers, when we elevate domestic care, when we say that like that load of laundry you just threw in, or that, like that snotty nose that you just nose Frieda'd, like that has value. When we say that has value, not just for the people who it's not just for the people who care for our children who are being paid to do it, but it's for all of us. It's showing the value that it has in society. And you can be as absolutely bipartisan, non-political as you want to be about it, if you can make the economic argument that we need this generation of kids to grow up to support our economy and to know what sustainable working parenthood looks like and the value of caregiving. And thank you, meta-analysis. Whoever said meta-analysis, that's exactly the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Anything I think for you, Katie and Tina, did you think about flexibility or have you found it being any empowerment in kind of the return to work? Katie, you get to be in this awesome supportive environment. So it's like, I feel the same way in Vivvi, where, I even had to have a conversation at one point when I was taking this job of like, I don't know if they can, like, I have a 2-year-old at this point, and I'm going to be working off hours because I'll have to log back in and they're going to want me to work. It's a startup. There's a ton of hours I'm going to have to be a part of. And I kind of backed out of my interview process only to have the CEO say, hey, do you remember that you're auditioning for a role in a childcare? Like, we're advocating for working families. I need you to get on board with the fact that you are a working family and this is what we do. Like, this is a real conversation. And if you can't advocate for yourself, I'm going to advocate for yourself. But I say that to say that even in the best working solutions, how have you had to change your advocacy for yourself? And
yeah, I mean, I'll say I'm still doing it, and like was joking before as we waited for all of you participants to join, was joking that I was geeking out that I got to talk to Lauren today, because I also like do not have this figured out. I do have a really supportive working environment. But it's a small start. I mean, as glamorous as we want to make sure all you guys think Hatch is, it's a small startup. Like, we work really hard. I worked all crazy hours through this entire pandemic, mostly with the child in my lap on my Zoom. I feel tremendously grateful that I was in an environment where I could have a child on my lap on my Zoom, but it often meant grabbing hours between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. and picking which days I showered to like make that work this year. I feel like I have a little bit of PTSD that like I'm scared of what comes next. Like now I've found comfort in being here. And while this has been the hardest year of my life, I feel so grateful that I got to be with my kids more than ever. As someone who did debate the like stay at home mom option versus going back, it was like someone gave me a little gift of having both in a weird way. And now I'm petrified of how much to give. I'm going to give that back. So Lauren, you're going to have to help me figure that out next. But the answer, I guess, on mine, I don't know yet. We're literally our teams are meeting now to try to start to think about like, what does September look like? What does January look like? We don't know yet. So I wish I had a better answer. And I'm very excited for Lauren to tell us all how to advocate for what we need coming out of this.
Tina, how about you?
I completely agree. I think I had a lot of conversations with other moms at my company while I was pregnant. And I remember getting some advice that was, after you have a baby and you realize that you created a life, that is almost a priority shift. Like, I remember feeling such a sense of power and just like, wow, if I can do that, like this job maybe isn't as hard as I thought it was. And I had like, maybe I was hormonal and emotional, but I had this like bit of a wave where I was like, I did this and like none of the other men at my company did. And like, I'm making this work and like, wow, maybe I can do more than I ever thought. I think I tried to like ride that high for a little bit, but then I also got advice, and what I spoke to a little bit earlier was like the setting your own boundaries. And yeah, I did have to do that. Like I was like Madison feed time on the calendar and like her little head and was right here on the Zoom calls. And like, no, I'm not going to turn my video on because I'm going to sit on the floor and fold laundry while I'm listening to this conference call. Like that's just what I did. And I was just like, you know what? It's survival mode and I'm going to do whatever I can to get by. And I think, I think to your point, Katie, the picking and choosing, I have days where I'm like, nope, I'm off at 4:00. I'm going to Vivvi to pick up Madison and we're going to the park. And I won't check my phone or my emails until after dinner and tubby time. And then when I'm sitting down on my own time with a glass of red wine, then I'll get back to you. And that made me feel powerful too. So I think I just like pick and choose my moments and just do the best I can to get through every day.
That's amazing. Lauren, anything you'd respond to? And then I think we'll turn it over to the audience to start throwing some questions at us.
Sure. I mean, these are all, I'm so grateful for the honesty, and what you guys are sharing, because I think that is really ultimately what helps everyone the most. And I think it's important to think of, when I said you are all my colleagues, like I actually mean that. It's one of, oh my God, sorry. Sorry, crazy rescue dog. She's really neurotic and the mail was just delivered.
Celebrities, they're just like us.
Okay, now that is ridiculous. Oh my God. And I will tell you, like, I just totally lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? The colleague thing. So one of the kind of big teachings that's come out of this time for me is that we have missed, those little interactions that, for those of you who worked in an office previously, maybe some of you are back, maybe some of you aren't, those little like incidental, I call them like your water cooler moments, your like candy jar people. I used to have a candy jar on my desk. We miss that. And we get a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people get a lot from those little interactions. And you get it in terms of career growth, because it's really good to know what's going on outside of your little team's bubble. But we also get a lot emotionally from it. It gives us a lot back. Like when we spend a lot of our days at a workplace, like it's how you spend, a good portion of your emotional day, right? And so it's important to build some of those moments back in now. And it's important also to remember, and if you can build them in ways that may feel a little constructed and like a little too deliberate, but like call somebody up who you actually haven't spoken to in 6 months because you haven't been on a project with them, but they're the person you would see at the proverbial water cooler, and like tell them you watched a panel and somebody told you to do it. And that's your way in. It's 10 minutes. They will be really glad to have been connected with too. But also all of the other working for money, paid working parents that and this includes people who are looking for work too, of course, they are your colleagues, and they help you in when they tell you what this time has been like for them, and when they open up in the way that we've heard the voices on this call open up, they help you expand your definition of what's normal on your team, but for your employer, in your specific industry. And I get to see this because I work with a lot of women in big law and a lot of women in tech and a lot of women in finance. And it's amazing what each of those groups thinks is like normal that the others would be like, no way. So let everybody right now who is a parent, particularly if they have a baby, your baby's age, and who is working, help expand that sense that you have of what's normal and what support we should have available for us. Because as we see this administration step up and start to commit real money to childcare recovery, to moms, to parents, to child tax credit so that no children live in poverty, well, that's okay. That's a great gross overstatement, but with the implication that no children should ever have to live in poverty, that's going to change our cultural norms. And policy does change that, and policy even internally at your little company does too. So it's important to know that when you stretch for something, you're stretching for like globally everyone. Yes, you, but this is how we change culture, is one mom at a time.
So I'll just say really quickly, because I know we want to turn to the group. I actually did do this, which I feel like very proud of.
That's awesome.
Lauren suggested it. When I was going back to work the first time, I called a bunch of moms that I really respected in my industry who had like children under 1 or 2 years old so I had done this recently. And then I also, because I'm a big research person, and also talked to then a bunch of moms who have husbands who work long hours, or partners who have long hours, which mine does. And was like, how do you what happens in your house from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m.? What happens in your house from what time you get home and what time is that to the end? Does your child ever pick the nanny over you? And like, what did you do when it happened? Like, I just asked all my biggest fears and logistical questions. And then I got little nuggets from each person. And I've texted those people too. I mean, they're just like industry friends. It was like another person who worked in PR, or another person who worked in whatever. I'll even text now and be like, okay, I'm confused. I'm at the next chapter of all this. And they're like just a little ahead of me. Like they're just doing this all like 6 or 12 months ahead of me. So I have the benefit of their learnings. And it's been one of the most helpful things that I've done.
I think it's great because then you can filter in what you get, like the yuck or the yum vibe, what is giving you the yum vibe. And especially for all of those of you who are planning your childcare experience, follow that yum vibe, but ask a lot of questions to a lot of people, because then you will be able to understand that every journey is the right journey for that particular family, and you can pick and choose the journey that makes sense for you. But you don't have to follow someone else's journey. You can sort of cherry pick across that. And I think that's what it's really all about, is listening to the stories, prioritizing, setting boundaries, asking like, where's the pump room and what do I do, is a amazing question that you're allowed to ask when you get back to work. And then also following those heartstrings too, and following that emotion. So I don't see any chats coming through yet, but I am excited. Oh, yes, I am excited to see some things. Amazing. Okay. Let's see.
I read this article.
Yeah, not only gap in heterosexual relationships, home burden, but also burden in the planning, monitoring, following through. Yes, the mental burden. Tips for navigating this additional part of the 5th trimester. I'll also add, we had a question that came in earlier about ensuring that it is a partnership, if that's where you are in your relationship, that you're partnering the parenting. Lauren, do you want to take that?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. First of all, I really do recommend Eve Rodsky's book, Fair Play. It just, whether you get the cards and actually do the methodology involved in it, there are just some key takeaways, including like whatever you divide up. If someone takes on, if someone in your partnership takes on like a task, like car is that person's duty or bath is that person's duty, they take it over wholesale. So they need to not just do the bath every night, but know if you're almost out of like the one kind of like wash that your baby doesn't get eczema from, like own it start to finish. So I will just advocate for Eve Rodsky's work there. It's really strong and smart work. In terms of the mental load, so there's so many ways that people define it. I think the most important thing to know is that you have to make it visible. If you want your partner to share in the work that is in your head, your partner has to know that it exists. And it is so tempting we professionalize like so much. We're so good at doing all the things, particularly if we've had uneven parental leaves. Like if mom has had a longer parental leave than dad has had, like go figure that in that time you've learned how to professionalize this stuff. So there are a few really concrete solutions to that. One, if dad or partner does have access to parental leave, to have the partner take that leave at the end of yours, like in the beginning, obviously to care for you if they can. But if you can't take it simultaneously, when you go back to work, have your partner take, even if it's just a week, like straight up time there. Let's baby get a little bit older before they're totally in someone else's care. It lets dad or partner actually be in charge. It lets you see that dad's in charge. It just offsets a lot of that inequity that like was kind of forced upon you circumstantially. Another way to divide, this is going to sound a little bit off topic. I promise you it's not. Something that we don't talk about, and I think this is like on my list of things that I really want to write about, is inequities in nighttime wake ups. I need like a better catchier term for it, but like, the invisible labor of nighttime wake ups. There's actually a lot of research done about sleep that, and this is all very heteronormative research because it's only been done with heterosexual couples. I would imagine there's a lot that pretty much lots of couples could extrapolate from it, but the data shows that dads aren't as aware of what happens in the night as mom. And I think biologically, as somebody who has had children, like I know that like if they blinked an eyelash, like I knew that in the nighttime, and I would wake up. And so dads aren't as aware, which really means that you have to connect every single morning, and it doesn't become like a big loaded question if you can actually do it every single morning of, hey, how was your night? Hey, how was your night? Compare notes, and it becomes pretty clear what's unfair pretty quickly. And obviously some of this, if you are breastfeeding and you want the child at the breast and not on a pumped bottle, you have to figure out what works for your family. But it's important to know that whatever you can do to protect, in an ideal world, 2 nights of full sleep in a row, like you would switch off, somebody would have like earplugs and an eye mask and be in another room, like those 2 nights. But good enough is 2 REM cycles, and 2 REM cycles is about 4 hours. And it's why, if you're a new parent, it's ridiculous, but the first time you wake up after a night in which like some of your sleep included a 4-hour chunk, you were like, oh, like the world is an okay place now. It's biological. It makes sense. So whatever you can do as you schedule things. In my life, what this looked like was I would try to go to bed at like 9 or 9:30. I would pump a bottle. My husband would stay up. He'd actually fall asleep on the couch, but then he'd wake up for for what we called the dream feed. Doesn't work for every family. He would do that at like 11, 12, and baby would be back up at 2. And I would have gotten that like 4 to 5 hour chunk. Fragmented over the course of the night. You really want to have like 7 if you can get it. But if one of those chunks is 4, you're doing okay.
I really appreciate the fact that we probably are talking about advocating for ourselves in the workplace, but then we sometimes think that our partners magically know exactly what we want, and to be able to truly advocate for what you need at home is important. And speaking of another layer of tough things to think through, corporate single parenting. I'd love to hear advice on and even challenging space.
So we should all listen to single parents is really what needs to happen. I will tell you, there is a sort of an odd overrepresentation of solo parents in my book. And I kind of didn't realize it until I got to the end. And it was because those parents had so much concrete advice to share and so little like, I'm not coming up with the right idiom, but like no chips on their shoulders about sharing it. Like they were not feeling conflicted about having negotiated for something. They were not feeling conflicted about having asked for help because they knew from day one to their core of being a single parent that if they could do a good job of advocating for themselves and taking care of themselves, they were actually by extension taking good care of their children. And so I think really what needs to happen is we need to all learn from that. So, if you have the resource of having a partner, like that is your best resource. And you have to think of that person as truly your partner, make all the labor visible, actually make the list of things to divide up, factor in time for you to take care of yourself, for your partner to take care of him or herself. And to do something together as a family, and that all counts. It all counts towards our vision of what we want working parenthood to look like. In all of the corporate talks that I do, the way there's a big chunk that I talk about sort of dividing up, labor in the home. And I always have to preface it with the fact that, like, I know a number of people on these calls don't have a partner in the home. So let us redefine what that is. That can be a friend, that can be a grandparent stepping in, which we've seen a lot of over the pandemic. But also, like, if you have a colleague who is a single parent, ask them what they need, because they definitely need more support. And it's just a wonderful unifying thing for everyone to feel like we can support each other. We all care for somebody.
Thanks, Lauren. Thinking back, thank you, Alexis, for understanding that there isn't any wrong thing that you do through your first return, but any mistakes or gaffes that you made that if you could take back, or if you just share out so that we try not to make them. And for everyone on the panel, if you have.
Well, I'll say a brief one. It wasn't a mistake or a wrong thing that I did, but I had a really supportive, I've always worked in startup environment, and the one job I happened to have that was more corporate was when I had my first child. And I could not have been more grateful to have an actual HR contact during that time period, who was really supportive of family leave. And when I was called to check in multiple times while I was out, and in a week or two before I came back, wanted to make sure I was still good, feeling good to come back, and said, my biggest advice to you is to not load up your calendar on day one. Like, I know you're an overachiever. You're going to come in, have like a meeting set up with every cross-functional partner in the first 2 days, get back in, And I really paced myself. I set up blocks of like catch my breath time, because it really is a huge transition. And it's now feedback that I have given to my team as I've welcomed moms back from leave. And I just feel so grateful that someone set that tone with me so that I can echo it now for team members that I support. Like I see the relief on their faces when that happens. So I really do encourage to pace yourself in that first week so that you set your own tone in coming back.
I think too, just being able to ask for help right from the beginning, and because your brain functioning is totally different when you come back. And I think we always say try to put your own oxygen mask on before you put anyone else's oxygen mask on. And I think being able to have self-care is, even if that is a shower, like I showered by myself with nobody looking at me from a baby carrier next to the bathtub, but like something like that every day, or as much as possible, to make sure you can be human. Because when you absolutely forget about that as a new mom, and then you get to a place where it just kind of overwhelms you. So try to advocate in that space too.
Yeah, I agree with Katie. You always have a risk of feeling like you've missed out. You haven't been around your coworkers for a while. So give yourself some time to, even Lauren was saying, those water cooler moments, and, get the gossip, see what's been going on, and like give yourself that 2-week onboarding period to just get back in the game. Don't worry so much about the actual work yet. And then I think in my specific industry, for me, it was a lot of like reaching out to clients again that I hadn't been in touch with. And my thing was like, here's a picture of my baby. What's going on? So, you can use that tactic too to just start the conversation. Everyone loves a cute baby photo.
I'll bring it right back to childcare, which is something that I have seen a number of my clients I hate to call it a mistake, but like they would probably say it was a mistake, is just something they missed was in the very beginning of all of the sort of communication that they had with their caregiver, whether it was a center-based or a nanny. They didn't express to them how often they wanted to be communicated with. And there are some people who totally want the pictures all day long. They want to know what they're eating. They want to know what everybody's up to all day long. And then there are other people who would find that ultimately really distracting, and sort of like the whole point of being able to focus at work is like to not be interrupted. I'm somewhere in the middle. But so I really recommend actually communicating how you'd like to be communicated with. Do you want like a check-in every day at noon? Do you want pictures at the end of the day? This is a really key one. I think Tina, you mentioned this about milestones. If baby has like a significant milestone, do you want to know about it? Or do you actually want to wait until it happens in your presence, at 7:00 at night, in which case, like, it is your first? Actually think about that and talk to your partner about it too, because it's nice to make that decision together, and communicate that to your caregiver who just wants to do a great job and wants to communicate in the way that you want.
And as we are wrapping up in that time, I'll say that we're all still on our own childcare journey. So just because the decisions that you think that you are making and are going to follow through with in the next couple of months, that does not need, that may be the thing that goes with you through the entire process. That may be just part one of a couple different adventures, and that is also okay. I think the journey and being able to speak along the journey is really the important component. So being able to speak along your journeys, I can't thank the three of you enough for all of the advocacy, all of the ups and downs and everything in between, and really being able to be honest and open about your experience. More conversations like this need to just keep on happening, and I'm just truly grateful that you're here to participate. Thank you to all of our attendees who are here. We can't wait to continue to keep the conversation going throughout this next year. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for being here.